Okay, hello. Thank you all for joining us. So today I have with me Mel. Mel is a leadership coach and she has spent years in the HR talent industry. So I'm really excited on the topic we are going to be discussing today. And the topic we have today is stop competing with your old self. So I'm going to pass it to Mel for her to first of all do something for us, introduce herself. But I want the introduction to also shed more light into how people can do it effectively, especially when when they find themselves in the interview setting. Because Mel has a lot of years spent in the talent industry. So I want us to get that juice from that experience. So, first, Mel, thank you so much for being here with us. I do appreciate your time for you to be here, have this conversation, and I am so excited. I know, like we were speaking in the background, this is something I just enjoy doing because, one, personally, I am learning, and also people who are listening are also learning. I was explaining earlier that one of the things that has really helped me at this point of my life is just listening to this kind of conversation, light bulb moment, tips, tricks that could help one navigate life. So it's such an honor to have you here and spend this time with you. So please, Mel, can you please introduce yourself? Give us some tips also on how we can also do it better when we find ourselves in that interview setting.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Sandra. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you and everyone that's listening. I'm thrilled that we can have this conversation today. Hi, I'm Mel Sedato, and I'm an executive and leadership coach. I am a former Fortune 100 HR executive, and I spent 25 years in corporate roles until starting my own coaching firm. And so Sandra and I are colleagues through the Forbes Coaches Council, and so that's how this came to be. Um, and just to give a little bit of context of what I do now, I help high achieving leaders grow into bigger and more visible roles with clarity, confidence, and impact. And I partner with organizations to help accelerate the success of their leadership bench strength so that leaders in their organizations are operating at the level the business actually needs them to. And my passion around this is really helping build leaders that both know themselves and
Mhm.
believe in themselves. And so
Mhm.
that's what I'm really sort of all about. But to your point, Sandra, I did spend 25 years in corporate. It's a lot of years in a variety of different types of HR roles. And I know many of the listeners are often, going for that next job, and they're, putting themselves out there. And I think, the market can be really tough at times. It can be very competitive. And I think a couple of things that are really important that I would share is building your network and your connections and getting to know people and building relationships with people. I think that's how most people find jobs now. It's not necessarily on job boards all the time, or applying through LinkedIn posts. And I think when you actually do get a chance to have that interview, there's a balance of really being able to clearly share your expertise and what you bring to the table, but also uniquely what
Mhm.
you personally and nobody else can bring to the table, because we do all have really wonderful, unique, and special things about us that are our superpowers that we can share with the world and offer the world. And so I often advise people to, don't just focus on the skills of the jobs, bring you to the table and who you really are, because that connection and that relationship really matters from the start. So,
Awesome. Thank you. I love how you blended your introduction with some of those tips and tricks. So if you're listening, you've heard how she said, how can you present yourself better in an interview? It's not only about the expertise that you have, but it's a blend between what you're good at, what you're there to offer, and also your own unique personality and your superpower. So now getting into the topic of stop competing with your whole self. So first of all, tell us, Mel, like what was the spark and what is your why for that
yeah.
topic? for this
It's
topic?
such a great question. And I would start by saying, what the topic really is, what I see a lot, and I experience myself personally, that a lot of high achievers think they're falling behind. And what's
Mm,
actually happening is they're measuring themselves against a version of success that just doesn't fit anymore. And they're being very overly loyal to an old version of themselves that made them very successful and got them to where they are today. And so that's sort of the what the topic is. And oftentimes these are things that, um, the I shoulds that run through your head, right? Like, I
mm,
should stay in this role because I worked really hard to get into it and a lot of other people wanted it. And so if I leave it, what am I doing? Or I feel like I should have all the answers, or I'm only valuable when I'm producing things for other people. And these are the I shoulds that run through our heads that tend to get in our way.
mm,
So that's sort of what the topic is. And to your question about how I came up with this topic and this session, it's really personal to me. This came from my own experience, but I also see it pretty consistently in the clients that I work with today. So that's what really sort of culminated and built this. And the story for myself, at least, is, in my own career, I worked really hard to get my dream job.
mm,
But the biggest and most important part for me of getting there was completely personal. It didn't have anything to do with the title or anything like that. When I was younger, I was so terrifyingly shy that I could barely speak in a group. I didn't feel
wow.
like I had a voice at all. And so to grow from that into an executive at a Fortune 100 company where I was leading others and in front of people a lot, it just really meant something to me. What I had
Mm,
achieved, I was, and I mean, still am very incredibly proud of how far I came. And what I found myself in a situation of was that identity was something that I became really loyal to internally because I was
mm,
so proud of how far I came. And, over time, my life changed. I got married, I had my daughter, I lost my father. Like all of these things in my life happened. And my priorities started to change. And what
mm,
I wanted work to represent in my life started to change. And I
mm,
could feel it brewing internally to me, but I kind of ignored it because I couldn't really define it yet. Um, and it also didn't feel like just a career decision to me. It felt like so much more than that. It felt like if I chose something different, then I was letting that younger version of myself down. That I was somehow invalidating all the work that I had put into growing and evolving myself up to that point. And like I was letting down other people who believed in me and took a bet on me along the way. So, I stayed in that space for far too long, honestly. Knowing something had shifted, but not really being ready to face what it was.
mm,
And, what I realized through this experience that I wasn't stuck because I didn't know what I wanted. I
mm,
was stuck because I hadn't updated how I saw myself. And
mm.
I was still holding myself to this version of success that was not who I was anymore. I had changed.
Interesting.
The company hadn't changed, but I had changed, right? And so I see this, as a version of this story, certainly not the same personal story, but a version of this type of story all the time now with leaders that I work with. They have changed, what they want has changed, but they're standing still.
Mm,
So they're not really competing with other people for jobs or competing with other people for, success on the job. They're really competing with themselves. So that's sort of where the whole motivation, the spark, as you put it, for this session really came from.
awesome. That's so. It's thank you for sharing that, and you shared a lot there, and some happy moments. And sorry about the loss of your dad.
Oh, thank you.
So now when we look at some of the things you mentioned the fact that that struggle where you know that you have changed, but you're still attached to your old self. And you did mention something that success begins to look different.
Mhm.
How would you, in hindsight now, how would you define success? Would you say success is different at each level? Maybe when you are a younger professional, success is different from you, and being a much more older professional. But if you should pick up all your experiences together, 25 years of experience is, it's outstanding. How would you define success?
Yeah, I think for me now, success is really more about how I feel day to day. It
Mm,
is, that I'm spending time on the things that are important to me, that I am balancing work with my personal life. I have a chronic health issue. I know I need to be able to manage that in a way that I didn't really feel like I could before. And so I am able to manage that and flex my day around that. I also think for me, success is seeing, my clients be successful, to see them learn and see them grow. I think it's, meeting people like you, Sandra, and like in this process and having these conversations, there's value in all of that to me that I feel like I have so much more richness in my life now because I have grown in different ways. I've learned to run a business. I never thought in a million years I would run a business. If you had asked me 2 or 3 years ago, it would not be what I would have said I would have been doing. But I stepped into it and I learned it. So for me, learning is a huge part of the process too. And
mm,
being committed and um, I know finding joy in the process of learning and growing is something that's always been there for me, but I think I lost it after a while. And so these last, couple of years have really been fuel for me and so much energy for me around that in growing in ways I haven't grown before. And I've loved every step of it.
awesome. Now, I want you talk about the framework you I know earlier chatting about you that you on this conversation that you do have for your clients. So when you work with people and you're trying to help them to stop competing with their old self, what is that approach? What is that framework you apply? If you
Yeah.
could
So
share some of it, if not all.
yeah,
Please.
absolutely. Yeah, I really think about it in 4 steps. First is acknowledging and naming what it is, which honestly is sometimes the hardest part. Um, it's easy for
Mm,
us to push these little voices in our head away, right? And these thoughts that run through our mind, the stories we're telling ourselves. But the first step is really acknowledging and naming what they are. Put it down on paper. Um, think about it. Be really brutally honest with yourself. And then the second step is really trying to understand it more. So, where did this come from? Where is this rule you're, telling yourself you need to operate by coming from? How has it helped you succeed? Because, the patterns you have served you. They wouldn't be there if they didn't. So there's a lot of honor in that and respect for that that I think sometimes we skip over. Sometimes we're too quick to judge ourselves and say, "Oh, I should have taken care of this or I should have done that." Um, when these things are, they've helped us along the way. And then thinking about what is it costing you now? So is it getting in your way now? Is it still helping you in the way that it used to? Or is it pulling away from what you really want? And that actually, it's a lot of work. That's a lot of really deep self awareness and reflection and honesty that you have to be willing to have with yourself. The third step is then consciously choosing what to do with it. Like, does this still belong? Does it need to evolve or change? Or does it just need to go altogether? Like for me, feeling like I needed to stay in the role I was in to honor the younger version of myself, it was a lost. It felt like a grieving process to me.
mm,
It was very hard for me to let go of that, but I knew I 100% knew that it wasn't who I was anymore. And so deciding to let go of that is not easy. There's a whole process of grief beyond that if it's something that you're deeply connected with. And once you're able to process that, choice that you've made, then you can really shift into this future you, if you will. So after you let go, then you have space to say, what do I want to step into? Like, what does success look like for me today? What actually matters to me now? Who am I becoming in this season of life? And, because, to grow, you need to create space, but you also need new perspective. And I think sometimes we focus a lot on the skills we need to build and the jobs we have, and how we need to, keep up with AI and technology. And those are all really relevant and important things. But to grow, we also need a new perspective. It's
Mhm.
not just putting, more pressure on yourself to build skills to perform and get results or hit that KPI. It's what additional perspective do I need to bring to myself and to the work that I do. So, I mean, I think in total, those 4 steps is really about asking yourself and being honest with yourself about who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? It's really about mastering yourself, like the self mastery process.
Wow, this is a lot that has been packed in this few minutes, but it's really a lot. Like, when the more I hear you speak on these things, the more I can really connect because of some similarities in the work that we do. When you talk about self mastery, knowing that self mastery is one of those things that you just need to achieve, and if you can really achieve that, you're definitely going to be the high achiever that you're looking out for. And when you and another concept that reminds me of some of the things that you say is that most times we want to know so many things. We want to know about technology, we want to know about others, we want to know about this and that and history, but it's as if we neglect to know so much about ourselves, to
Mm,
really sit down and do that deep work of, like, just like you said, is this really serving me? How have this served me? Who am I becoming in the process? Like, really deeply getting that self mastery. Another way I'll put it, like, do you have a PhD in yourself? Can you
yeah.
say I have a PhD in myself? That kind of terminology. So it's really interesting to know that. And there's something you mentioned in your word, and I've heard that being said a lot in the workplace. Who would you call a high performer?
What would I call a high performer?
Yes.
Like, how to
So
define it?
yes, how would you rate that person? How would you define a high performer? Because I feel like everyone in the workplace to a large extent wants to be a high performer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's different in every organization. What's valued as success and high performance, I think, is different depending on the industry you're in and the job you're in that industry. But I think when I think about high performance, it's the people that are obsessed might be a strong word, but really obsessed with doing the best they possibly can. And,
Mhm.
they are very focused on results and very focused on making a difference and having an impact in the work that they're doing. And they're just laser focused on it. And I think there's a balance there in some industries. That's not actually what success looks like. But when I think about the corporate space, that's often what I see that successful high performer, a higher achiever to look like.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was really straight bullet points that people could use as well. You mentioned about the grief that we could sometimes feel when we are detaching ourselves from the old self. Tell me, what does that look like? Is it just something internally or internal, or you think that there is also this external pressure that comes with it? You mentioned, I don't want to let down on people who had probably kind of like looked up to me. What does that really look like?
Yeah, it's such a good point. It is a very internal and external process, and I would compare it a lot with losing a loved one. Like, it's
Mhm.
a part of you, a piece of you that you are losing, or you're walking away from. And just in a relationship, if you break up with someone, it's really hard to break those ties, right? And doing that with yourself is hard. It's not easy, and I think you have to be really patient with yourself And I think also learn to have a lot of gratitude for who you are right now and who you were. And I think sometimes people speed by that. And
Mm.
the grief you feel, I think we've heard this a lot on, if you're watching TikTok and Instagram, right? Grief is just love, right? And there's a deep deep love you feel for yourself, and how far you've come. And so that is so hard to break. So I think it takes time. And I would say even now, a couple years later, there's still times where that grief surfaces, right? And I think about that. But it's a process, and you just have to learn to be patient with yourself. And that also is very hard for many of us. We're very quick to judge ourselves and be really hard on ourselves, especially when we make a change like this. um, that also makes me think about just what makes this so complicated is that our brains are designed to prioritize things that are familiar to us. Like, who I've
Mhm.
always been feels really safe.
Mhm.
It's like the unknown versus the known, right? And even when it's causing you pain, or it doesn't feel right, it's not serving you anymore, who you've always been feels really really safe. And so when your brain is designed to protect you in that way, and so growth can feel like a threat in a lot of ways. So it's really important just to understand yourself, like we were saying, and what you're holding on to and why, and what its relevance has been in your life, because that will help you start to process it more.
Wow. I have a lot of things like going through my mind as you as you're speaking. And you know what really makes it so difficult for people to um leave their old self, leave things that are not serving them. And I believe that there are times that people also have this withdrawal whereby they try to leave their old self, but they go back again finding themselves to that person that they want to be. So, what exactly is that thing? And I'm also saying, because now we're really talking in a professional setting, right? And could it be also like financially? But I don't even want to say financially now, because maybe you're at that level whereby senior manager, you've really done a lot. You've probably saved or things like that. But what are those factors that you would say that really makes it hard for one to break away from that their old self? And before you go ahead, there's something I hear John Maxwell say. He says that for you to be able to get more, you must be able to give up. It's called the law of trade-off, meaning if I want to get something of value, I would need to give something of value. It's not always the fact that, oh, I'm just going to clear this out of my schedule. For example, you were talking about space, right? And personally, for me, I was looking at my calendar. There were certain things that I really wanted, but at the same time, I knew that I needed to give up some things that were valuable to me. It was really painful, but I'm like, if I need to get to this future self, like you were talking about, I need to be able to, even though I really love this so much, but yes, it has served me, but I need to stop engaging in this right now so that I can actually reach for the future version of me that I really want. So tell us more about those circumstances that really hold people down, and it's just hard. you know and some people are like, I try to do it myself. I can't do it. I cannot do it myself. So once you tell us that, I really want you to go in the place of how important is accountability when you're trying to stop competing with your old self.
Yeah, and there's so much of what you just said is so true, every bit of it. There can, especially when you're talking about a job, the old self is tied to a job. I think for most of us, there's a financial component to that, because our job is what helps us, build our living and build our wealth, right? So that's significant, and you have to consider that in everything you do. And um, you know, for folks that are struggling with that, at least in my clients, oftentimes what I work with them on is their relationship with the situation they're in, right? These external
Mm,
factors, you can't control them, right? You need a job, you need money, you need things to live the life you want to live. And so thinking about your relationship with those things and how you respond in the environment that you're in to get the most out of it for yourself, because perhaps it's not the perfect situation for you, but there is value in it. And you can find a place to feel more motivated and connected with what you're doing. Um, I think one of the most common things I see people do, particularly in changing moments at work, is to kind of be like, okay, well, the company's told me what's changing, why it's changing. They're helping me, build knowledge and skills so that I can, do what I need to do in the future. So I'm just going to put my head down and do them and move on. And that's extremely common. But the question also becomes, am I going to go through the motions and play
mm,
my role, or am I going to make it personal? And if you want to feel engaged and motivated at work, I would argue that any change in any circumstance like that, you've got to make it personal. Work is personal. It's a huge part of your life. You invest a lot of your time and energy in it. And so really looking at your relationship with work and the environment you're in is really, really important. So to the financial side, that's sort of where, what I see. And I know there's more to the question, but now I got far down that road and I forgot what the rest of it is.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Mel. That I like what you said. You said work is deeply personal. We spend most of our time at work, a lot of emotion, trying to do our best that we can possibly do. So it's really personal. And other areas that we would love you to like touch more is what are additional factors that could like just hold us back to in competing. You just find yourself still competing with the old version of you. And how important would accountability be, having someone you can, for example, coming to you as a coach, how important would that help me to be able to stop competing with the old self?
Yeah, I think in what you're saying too, I think there has to be some sort of turning point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that shifts your motivation into really focusing on that future thing that you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's you didn't get the job you wanted and you really want it, or um, you know, you're not happy and you want to shift that. You want to put more boundaries in place at work, whatever it might be. There has to be something that shifts for you, because for each of us to change, we have to want to change. And that motivation has to be there for us. And, I think when I think about the times in my life where I have made huge changes, it is certain there's been an impetus to change and motivate me to change, right? Like leaving the small town I grew up in and coming to Boston and, building my career here, I would not have wanted to do that had it not been for my dad cheering me on every step of the way and telling me to shut out the noise and focus on what I wanted and to go after it, right? Like, so there was someone there cheering me on and helping me figure out how to take the steps I needed to take to do what I really wanted in life, right? When I decided to leave corporate, a lot of what pushed me off the fence and to make a decision to leave was me finding out I had a chronic illness and knowing that in order to manage it, I couldn't keep working and living the way that I was. I needed to change a lot of things about me to make it work. So I think those are big examples, but I think it's a couple different examples of what things can kind of draw you out, because it is, you know, it's really hard to let go of that old self. But what is really valuable and helpful in that process is having a clear vision of what you really want to work towards and having the motivation and the desire to make it happen. And sometimes you need help to figure out, well, what does that look like? And, what are some steps that I can take to get there? And, I'm always very encouraging of people to practice experimenting, right? Like if, for example, there's something you've noticed that, one outdated standard or rule you're holding yourself to, you realize that doesn't serve you. And if it's not, just try one small experiment to change the rule altogether. Just one small thing. See how it goes. See how you feel about it. And then start to think about, okay, what's next, right? So I think there's things that coaches can help you with. I think there's also things you can coach yourself along as well. So it's a both and, but I think a lot of it has to do with you having a clear vision of what you want, and taking the time to really, really flesh that out for yourself so it feels real and tangible. Because it's really hard to move from unknown to an unknown. But if you can start to make that unknown more known, it's it's safer and easier for you to start shifting towards it.
I feel like somehow I feel like you're speaking to me. You're like, I just feel like you just like directly just I'm just like, oh my goodness, she's just really touching spots in my soul. Like, oh no, 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 no. When you mentioned having that, flesh out that vision, know exactly what you really want to do. And because we are also in the woman, this is Women History Month, there are also women who find themselves in this certain situation. And this is a question I want to ask is, it's gonna be personal, but you don't need to go into too much detail. And I'm also speaking for many women as well, or people who are also in this type of situation. Was there ever a point where you felt like your body failed you?
That my what? I'm sorry,
Like
body.
the body failed you? For
Oh,
example,
the
like
body failed. Yes,
yes.
yes,
For
absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
yes.
And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's really, really, really hard. I know when I started having issues with my chronic illness, I started having symptoms. I didn't know what was going on, and it was really scary. It was really, really scary. That unknown was terrifying in so many ways because some of my symptoms were very similar to the symptoms that my dad experienced before we found out he had cancer and he passed away. And it was absolutely unknown was so terrifying to me. And, I'm in my 40s, I'll be honest and upfront about that, right? But like, I knew I was in an era where my body was going to change again, right? Like, I knew there was another big change coming. But it's really frustrating when you can operate a certain way for a very long time and then your body just tells you no. Um,
Mm.
it doesn't matter what you think in your mind or how hard you push in your mind. When your body's done, your body is done. And it makes a strong statement when it needs to. And honestly, I think going through that process taught me a lot about listening to my body more. I think I was terrible at listening to my body for the first, 25 years of my career, 40 years of my life, right? Like I was terrible at it. And it's really helped me to slow down and focus on it. And I wish I had done it earlier, but I can't go back and fix that, right? Like it is what it is now. And all I can do is move forward and take as best of care of myself as I can now. Um, but it's difficult to wake up one day and not be able to do what you used to be able to do before. um yeah, it's tough.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that is deeply personal, and thank you for sharing that because there are many people out there who are pushing themselves so hard trying to compete with their old self, or some other external factor, and they keep pushing. But this is to also like tell them, that there is a need to pay attention to your body, and also knowing that you can continue to even strive, and does not mean life stops, but you can have, like you said, a different perspective and continue to make that difference that you want to make. So now, Mel, tell us, in your coaching practice, you have a coaching practice.
Mhm.
So tell us some of the things you have discovered stepping into the water of entrepreneurship owning your own business, and someone's out there and saying, no, this is exactly, I've spent a lot of years in corporate. I want to leave. I am tired. I can take it again. I want, so just tell us what it feels like owning your own business.
It's a lot sometimes. But I mean, honestly, I would say I think what it is helped me do is step even more into my voice, which honestly
Mm.
makes that young version of me even prouder. So I honestly feel like I have grown more in the last couple years than I have in a really long time. And it's the stepping outside of my comfort zone and taking a risk and betting on myself. And I don't know. I think the biggest things about it are just it feels like a journey to me. It feels like, I think a lot of people could hear this conversation and think like, wait, are you saying your values change? Are you changing, who you are? No, I think I still have largely the same values I've had my whole life, but I think how I prioritize them has changed. And I think how I express them has changed. So, I feel like starting my own business has been a completely different expression of who I am and what my values are. So, for what that's worth, that's what my experience has been with it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I think we're right on time. So thank you so much, viewers, for listening to our conversation. Please you can connect with Mel on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
and you can also check our website on the work that she does on coaching, leadership, and executive coaching. So, Mel, before we go, is there one tip you can leave out there for young professionals, senior executive, people who are in that transition phase? So, these three category of people who are just starting early in their career, people who are in senior executive level, and people who are in the transition phase. They want to leave corporate and they want to start their own thing. What's your word for them, pattern word for the show?
Word. Hmm. Um, what's coming to mind is a phrase, not a word.
Okay, I know what, it's okay.
Okay. Show up for you. Show
Mm.
up for you. Being true to yourself in what you do will leave you with no regrets. So I think that's the phrase. Sorry, I couldn't boil that down to a word. Maybe someone could boil it down to a word for me. But it's so important for all of us.
Show up for yourself.
Yeah.
Show up for yourself. Amazing. Thank you so much. And before we go, any last word for me?
No, just thank you so much, Sandra, for having me. This has been a fun conversation. It's been great to speak with you, and I can't wait to continue our conversations. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hopefully, this is not going to be the last, because there's so much you are going to be doing out there. 25 years of experience, bringing it into the coaching world, helping a lot of people, senior executives. There's going to be a lot coming in. As a matter of fact, I heard something this week that I haven't. I heard it from someone, definitely. So I really believe there is a lot of insight into what the person is saying, that a lot of people do. The statistic is showing that most people do most of their best work when they are in the later part of their years. And that is because of the wealth of experience that they've had over the years, the relationship that they've built. So when I see people who are in their early 40s, late 40s, who are doing something new, building this thing, whether it's a coaching business or product, whatever you're building, I know there's a lot of value in that, because bringing all those years of experience into what they are doing, definitely it's amazing. So I'm really looking forward to the exciting and interesting things that are ahead, and hopefully once again there'll be more frameworks that we can continue to explore and master ourselves, and stop competing with, this is the person I used to be. I used to own this title. I want to still own the title. No, you don't need to compete with the title. You don't need to compete with that dreams and vision, and you can definitely continue to move forward. And I'm going to end this, wrapping this with something that, just to connect this. So there's this story of a guy who was into art, and that he would just say, oh, that's my passion, this is something I'm passionate about. And as fate would have it, he met a friend, and then the friend said, I always knew you as a good guy, and there's this opportunity that is out there. Will you be able to come in, do something related to technology? I really don't know anybody, but I know you're smart, I know you're a nice person, and I just want you to take the lead on that. And all of a sudden, his trajectory just changed. He became a tech expert and a number of things. So even when it comes to our value or the passion, the things that we hold on to, there are times that life may require you to just have a transition. You begin to see life from a different perspective. Not necessarily, like you said, you're abandoning your value, but you find a different way of expressing the things that you hold on to. So that's really profound, even as we begin to talk about the topic, stop competing with your old self. So thank you so much, Mel. It's such an honor to have you being sharing your experience with us, the vulnerability, and I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Please show some love to us. Tell us comments on this podcast on the LinkedIn. Thank you so much, everyone who is watching.
Thank
Bye.
you.